Like it has been for much of the country, it has been very cold here in southeastern North Carolina. So we are keeping things warm with some hearty meals. And I am kicking things off first by making a big batch of sourdough pie dough that I'll be using for pot pie later. I have been transitioning my family and our recipes to fresh milled flour, so I am milling some soft white wheat. And then I'm just putting this in my food processor and combining it first with some sourdough starter. So this is actually discard. And a lot of you have asked me recently, when can you put a tight lid on discard? So once your sourdough starter has completely metabolized, is deflated, and there are no bubbles, you can put a lid on it and stash it in the fridge. And what I do is I just store a couple feedings worth of discard that way, and then I use it up in recipes like pie dough. I am making a really big batch of pie dough for a pot pie and then to have extra dough later. So I tried to fit all of this in my food processor, but it would not fit. Even though I tried willfully, it just didn't work. So I did have to take it out and put it in a bowl and use a regular old pastry cutter just to get it going. So sometimes cutting corners just causes more work. So if you are making a batch of pie dough like this, I would recommend just doing one at a time in your food processor if it is small like mine. One thing that can make cozy meals and cozy winter cooking a little more accessible, especially during busy weeks, is making a big batch of pie dough, for example. Because when you make this dough, you can put it in the fridge for a number of days. And when you add sourdough discard to it, it actually very slowly metabolizes those grains, making those nutrients more available. So it's really a great way to keep healthy food around, but to also keep something cozy around too, because really on a Monday night, you probably don't want to make pie dough. But if the pie dough is already made for you, then you can have a pot pie any night of the week. So after making the pie dough, I am just wrapping it up in portions and then sticking in the fridge overnight. So this is actually the day before I did all of my cooking. Now, I definitely don't think that cozy winter meals have to be long and complicated, but I do feel like sometimes those hearty foods require more steps or there's like a slow cooking process. So anything I can do the day before or to prepare ahead in advance is always welcome. So for that pot pie, I'm actually making the chicken the day before too. So I just have some chicken breast here. Chicken breast can be a little bit expensive. So if you can't get them on sale, I would recommend just pressure cooking a whole chicken. It's a lot more affordable that way, and then you can just pull it when you're ready to use it. But here I am just seasoning that chicken with some salt, pepper, freeze-dried onion powder, and garlic, and then baking it. It is the next day, and when I woke up, it was 23 degrees. And in some parts, maybe that isn't very cold, but here on the coast of North Carolina, that is very cold for us. So I am warming up the kitchen first with some slow cooker split pea soup. So for this, as always, I'm using my Bruden Taylor proofing box, which doubles as a slow cooker. I love this thing because it's collapsible and it's easy to store. So I'm getting that warmed up, and first I am just frying up about a half a pack of bacon. Now for split pea soup, you can definitely use ham or a ham bone, but I had bacon already that needed to be used, so that's what I am using. While that is cooking, I am chopping up some vegetables. So I'm keeping things really simple here. A half an onion. I only have baby carrots. My husband grabbed baby carrots at the store. I thought he got regular carrots, but they weren't. So I'm just chopping up little baby carrots, and then I am cutting the bacon into small pieces. You could definitely do this before frying it. Honestly, I'm not sure why I didn't, but I realized it needed to be in bite-sized pieces, so I just used a pair of kitchen scissors for that. And now that that fat is rendered out, I am just adding in the onion and carrot right in there and seasoning it with a little bit of salt and pepper, but take it easy on the salt if you're using bacon or a ham, because it probably already has a lot of salt, so you don't want to over salt your food. Now, I broke my garlic press, so I'm using this cool little silicone tool to peel the garlic, and then I am mincing it by hand, which of course works totally fine, but a garlic press is a little bit easier, so I need to buy a new one. And once that garlic is aromatic, I am pouring in some chicken broth. I tend to prefer homemade chicken broth, and I almost always have some homemade chicken broth in the freezer, but I did not have any, and I had some chicken broth in the pantry, so we are using that today. And now I am rinsing off some split peas, putting them right in there and bringing it to a boil. One of the things I really like about the Bruden Taylor slow cooker is that you can just put your Dutch oven right into the slow cooker itself. So you can bring everything to a boil on the stove and get it going and then just start slow cooking it, which makes it pretty efficient and easy. So this slow cooked for about 8 hours and it was so good. So I just gave it a stir. It didn't need any salt. It didn't need any pepper. It was perfect as is. And this is such an easy and delicious winter meal. And having that slow cooker on, it just adds a little warmth and ambiance to your kitchen. That's so nice on these cold days. Of course, you can make all of these meals throughout the week, but I'm actually making all of them on one day. So I'm trying to keep the kitchen tidy as I go because really a tidy kitchen feels a little bit cozier and it's definitely easier to work in. I am making a meatloaf with a hot honey sauce. And this is actually one of the first things I ever made my husband when we were dating. So this is a family favorite. You can get this recipe over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. But simply, it is 2 pounds of ground beef, 2 eggs, a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, which I think I actually said correctly for the first time, steel cut oats, which is one of the secret ingredients. The other secret ingredient is celery seed, and then a little bit of fresh or dried parsley. And then I also put in some sauteed onions. Many times I have made this without cooking the onions first, and it still turns out totally fine. It is a little bit better if you cook the onions first. And then I'm simply just mixing this up by hand. I try not to overwork it, but I do use my hands, which is like kind of funky sometimes because I just can't get those ingredients combined as well with a spoon. And now I am putting this in a regular old loaf pan and making the hot honey sauce. So this is a combination of ketchup, honey, sriracha, and cumin. And over on my blog, I have sort of what I think are the ideal measurements for that sauce, but you can really adjust it however it suits your preferences. If you want it a little sweeter or a little spicier or a little more or less cumin, definitely you can adjust them. And I'm putting that glaze on top of the meat and then baking this at 350 for about an hour. Now, the problem I run into with this every single time is my husband always says there's never enough sauce, so I recommend making an extra batch for dipping. The steel cut oats really hold this together and make it nice and hearty. So when you cut into it, it doesn't fall apart like a lot of other meatloaf recipes do. It really holds together. Sometimes I see these meatloaf recipes with broth and they're always too soft. This one is really nice and hearty and holds together. Of course, there are a lot of ways to cultivate a cozy home this time of year. You can light a candle, start a fire, have lots of cozy blankets around, fuzzy socks, those sorts of things. But I really do think at the heart of it, it really starts in the kitchen. The oven warms the kitchen. The food, of course, makes us feel warm and cozy, and it brings us together. So really, I do think one of the easiest ways to create a little cozy is in the kitchen. And so I am doing that with a chicken pot pie. So this goes back to that pie dough that I made earlier in the video. The intention here was to make a slab pie. We'll talk about that in a minute. It didn't quite turn out, but first I am making the filling. So I already have the chicken made. I chopped up some leeks and I am soaking those leeks in water. So leeks can get pretty dirty when you grow them. So soak them for a few minutes. And then when you're ready to use them, pull them out. Don't dump them. Pull them out, drain them, and rinse them. Because as you can see here at the bottom of the bowl, there's a lot of dirt that came out of those leeks. So that's a really good hack. But I'm cooking those leeks in some butter for I'd say about 5 minutes or so until they start to turn translucent. And then I'm adding in some chopped up baby carrots again and some celery and cooking until those vegetables are soft. Now you can season this however you want. I use thyme and Italian seasoning, and at the very end I decided it needed a little sage, but you can add whatever you want to it. Oh, and at some point I did add a splash of white wine vinegar for just a little touch of acidity. To thicken it, you essentially make a roux. So I'm adding in equal parts butter and flour. So I used 4 tablespoons of butter and then let that cook and melt. And then I added 4 tablespoons of flour, which equals a quarter cup. And then I cooked that for a minute. And then I added in some chicken broth. And while that was cooking, I chopped up the chicken from yesterday. So it's really helpful to have these parts on hand. It's a lot of steps on the day of to make a pie dough and then to make chicken and then to make the filling to make a full pot pie. So it's really helpful to have all of that prepared. And then I'm adding in that chopped chicken, some frozen peas, a little bit of salt and pepper, and seasoning it to taste. Now here's where things went wrong. So we had a spilled milk incident with the first batch of pie dough. So that one was out. And the second batch of pie dough wasn't enough to actually make a slab pie, which is basically a pie on a cookie sheet. And at this point, I just was kind of over it. So I threw it in a baking dish. I just folded it over as best as I could and put it in the oven. And even though it was not beautiful, it was so good. That pie dough still turned out really flaky and delicious. And this was a great winter meal. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button below and to subscribe. And also don't forget to sign up for the email list. I will leave a link for that in the description box below. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I hope you are warm. I hope your meals are cozy, and I will see you again next time.